Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the ADH Dads. I always like to try to make JJ laugh with something uncomfortable and awkward before we start recording. Maybe just dived a little too personal with that one, but welcome, guys. How you doing, JJ?
I'm doing pretty good. Did you care to elaborate on the story that you were going to tell me just now, or is
I
that
don't
just
know
between the two?
Listen, we try to keep this show PG, and my bodily functions and digestive issues are not for our audience members at the moment. So that's just for your ears, buddy. That's privileged information.
That's funny. For the most part, when Cohen is, maybe has his own bodily functions going on, I'm not aware of it. But the one night I could hear from him sleeping on his bed, just this. I mean, he was firing them off left and right one night, and I'm a pretty good cook. I think I delivered something to him that was good for his system, but unfortunately, his system was deciding to just decide to sing some sort of song I hadn't heard before. So we all have to deal with it.
Yeah, getting old is no. It's for the birds or it's not for the birds. What's the saying? I'm too old. I don't remember. Yeah, man, just bodies are changing, man. I tell you,
Oh man, yeah, buddy. We've been going on this program, and I got a pivot from Coach Ray just recently, and I had asked him because I've had back issues for quite a long time, and it's been a number of years since I last threw my back out, and that's probably because I decided to put a little bit of focus on other areas of the body besides I was just doing running, and that's when I first threw my back out. And so I just simply texted him and I said, do you think it's okay or a good idea to do squats every day? Because, I told him, I said, I'd like to, strengthen my back and my legs because I didn't give them enough attention when I was, lifting when I was younger. And then I get a Marco Polo video message from him, and he's got this smirk on his face like, good luck with this program. So I'm doing for the next 5 weeks a daily leg day amongst all the other workout I'm doing. So yeah, every single day I'm going to do squats and stuff. It's already started up. I did it yesterday and the day before, and I don't know. It's
he did the same thing to me, man. I said, hey, man, can you throw some ab exercises in there? I'd like to work on my core, and now I'm doing abs every day, and I realized 2 weeks into that, well, I hate abs. It's like my least favorite body part to work out.
Yeah, but the benefit of all that, is like it is the core. The core is, it's attaching the top to the bottom, and everything needs to work through that. And I think it's really easy for us to kind of lose focus of those areas that really do support the entire body through most of what we do throughout the day. So, the core can simply mean, do some abs, do some back, and, do some butt, and, just all that different stuff to essentially support what it is that we do as dads, which, man, I'm telling you, I still carry Cohen around on my shoulders a lot of the time because he just likes that. And I'm like, I can still do it. That's great. But it does take its toll. And if I don't actually work on that in the way it needs to be worked on, oh man, I'm going to be, we're going to be talking about aging too quickly. Too soon, and I don't want to do that. So
I don't want that stage to end. I'm getting close with Naomi. She's 8 and she's very tall, Mm-hmm. So and we've gotten to the point where she can't sit comfortably on my shoulders anymore. She's got to kind of like shift to one shoulder.
Oh, that's the worst.
Because she's so long and lanky, So she has to like kind of put all of her weight on one shoulder, and then she has to like bounce back and forth when I carry her. And I'm noticing that the distance that I can go with her on my shoulder is not as long as the other kids. So we've got like a year, or two left, man, where like I'm gonna have that stage with her, and I've been really intentional about garnishing that moment and that memory. My wife is always giving me crap when we go to Disneyland or on walk-in. She's like, you're gonna hurt yourself, but I'm just like, let me be in this moment.
Yeah, when I took kid out to Disney World and his grandparents were with us, and she said, his grandma said to me, he can walk, and I remember thinking or saying it, well, yeah, he can. But two things. One, we'll probably have a cranky kid much earlier in the day if he walks a lot. And two, I'm not going to be able to do this for forever. And when I get to that point where I can't do it, which, is when he's going to be 18, I'm sure. um, it'll be hard to kind of think about that, knowing that that's something that's forever in the past. And it's an easy way to connect with your kids, to to feel that closeness. And I mean, physically you're just close, but honestly, you're connecting, and it's a big deal for me. So I would love to hold on to that as much as I can, for as long as I can. So I feel it, and sometimes my backs feel it, my shoulders with the arthritis that I developed over the last few years. Those definitely feel it, but I'm still grateful every single time I get to do it with him.
Yeah. Yep. So what are we talking about today, brother?
I don't know. How you feeling? How you feeling about this?
I'm feeling a little discouraged from my recent experiences trying to tackle this moment, or this topic, because we've been talking about wanting to talk about empathy on this episode, and with our neurodivergent kids, man, that can look a little different than it shows up in most. And I think that there's a certain stage of development where that becomes more prevalent, or kids start to understand that more, and maybe it's a little delayed or looks a little different with neurodivergent kids. So I kind of just want to talk about strategies and what that looks like in each of our lives, and what kind of methods have worked or not worked for us, because I think it's a constant rotation of different tools. So I just wanted to see what you were up to in that world, and what's working for you, or what's your experience has been.
Yeah, it is definitely an area where I've felt the 2 steps forward, and or 1 step forward and 2 steps back, whatever it is. There's definitely been a lot of mixed feelings about how it's going in my kiddos' world. And I think one thing that I just want to preface is that what I struggle with, not on a regular basis, but what I definitely struggle with is outsiders looking in and not trying to understand my kiddo. So they label him as, difficult or mean or, self-centered and stuff. And while one is not practicing empathy and is instead in a situation where they are focusing on what they can get, it can appear that way. But also, the other thing that I have said recently too is that my son craves connection. So the challenge that I face with him is identifying in others sometimes what he wants them to see in him. Because a lot of times when he is with his friends, or just a good example, he talked about wanting to see one of his friends that he knows at school. And I asked him, what would you like to do? And he says, I'd really like to show them this, and I'd like to have them, see me do this. And so it's definitely him focusing in on, the exchange and what he gets out of it. And that's been an ongoing conversation that I could either throw my hands up in the air and say, oh, he's just not getting it, or I could continue to ask questions. And that's kind of the big one for me, is how do I ask questions, and how do I carry on that conversation with him to understand a little bit more about what that looks like when somebody receives it, or what they might feel if they wanted to approach him and show him something. And it is, I'm telling you, that's a big practice in patience, because most of the time he'll come back to I, and he doesn't fully seem to get the concept of walking in somebody else's shoes, or taking the approach of what does that other person feel when they're going through this situation or this interaction with myself. So honestly, the big thing for me is just maintaining that consistency and modeling, and showing, like, teaching him some sort of like perspective taking. So anytime we can set up a scenario, and especially if we have like any sort of visual cues for them to look into, that to me is like the slow way to teach it, because sometimes it's not going to become as natural to kids with ASD or ADHD to take on the role of an empathetic listener. Rather, it does take a lot of examples for them to start to register it. And even then, when they register it, it might be just simply trying to go through the motions to try and get to a certain outcome that they want to get to. But I want to, of course, encourage the idea that that's still on the path to empathy, to developing empathy. Because, yeah, sometimes our kids with the ASD, ADHD, they simply lack that empathy in them. And it does take an extra effort of a bigger shovel to constantly put in the work over and over again till they finally get it a little bit more and want to practice it on their own. And who knows, they could be practicing it in a way that looks very much, internally, what can I get out of this situation? But that's okay, because if they're practicing it, they will see some sort of return in one way or the other. It could be a closer bond with somebody. It could be that somebody wants to be around them more. And that can, in its own way, bring them to the path of, developing a strong empathetic heart. It might look a little different. Their goal, their end goal might be one thing in their head at one point, but when they have that consistency where they're developing something with somebody else and that person is showing them feelings in return, I think that's how it starts to register. And it's about patience. It really is about patience. And man, I'm terrible with my patience sometimes in that area.
Mm. Yeah, I think you might be onto something there, in the sense that, maybe we try to rush like the feelings of empathy rather than like the tactical advantage that it can have for our neurodivergent kids, which, like, you say that and it kind of feels like, well, that's narcissism. Like, if you're just like manipulating people to get empathetic responses just so you can get what you want, but and I think of this book that we were talking about before this, and I've mentioned on this podcast, Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. He's a FBI hostage negotiator, and worked at Quantico and dealt with all these terrorist negotiations and kidnappings and stuff like this, and what he's learned through that career and how he implements it into like consulting for like businesses and corporations and even families, and your relationships with your wife and your kids even, and he uses the word tactical empathy, which again can kind of sound like this like hostage negotiator. I'm only asking you these questions to get what I want out of you, and I don't know why I use that voice, but that's how I imagine Chris Voss negotiates. But I think that something like that could be really beneficial for like Naomi's logical interpretation in her brain, not like, because you talked about perspective shifting, and like, well, how do you think that would make you feel if someone did that to you? And I'll tell you, brother, I don't know if that works in my household with my neurodivergent kid. She can poke holes in that, well, I would never do that in the first place. Well, I would never have friends that didn't like that. I would only hang out with people that liked going to the pool. So that wouldn't be an issue. She can find it doesn't work,
That's a smart kid then. That's one thing I recognize. Is she's very smart,
She has boundaries. She's checked her boxes. She knows what she wants, but I think that maybe like, well, listen, like, you're never going to, because we've talked about on this podcast how I've noticed that she struggles with social dynamics. She really wants friends, but she can't understand like why they're not long lasting, or how some of them maybe go a little, or they maybe seem to get frustrated with her. And we've tried again pointing out these perspective shifts and, well, are you bossy? Well, do you always have to be the one that says, no, or this or that? And, no, of course. So again, getting her to like put the mirror on herself can be difficult at times. But like when you open up the conversation to more of like, well, have you tried this? Then you may be able to get what you want. If you ask this question, then maybe they'll be more willing to play your game or listen to your idea rather, And I think that on the path to that, though, is where we grow into the empath response of like, oh, that's how they feel. Oh, I wouldn't want to feel that way, so, and maybe that comes with, like we were saying, development at a certain age, at a certain point, or maybe it takes very intentional, conversations about this and recognizing it and trying to get them to recognizing it repeatedly, like you said, with a lot of patience and persistence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that you pointed out there that I think is vital to our kids' understanding is, when they're in the moment and we're recognizing something and then we point out, okay, this is a way you're not connecting. Like that's kind of just telling them, after they've already probably, at least in some way, built up a story in their heads about why they're choosing this path in this situation. Like, that's going to be harder for them because they are focused on this, this task, this goal. This is what I want to do. This is why I'm playing this way. So kind of trying to pull them out of that situation and saying, hey, these kids don't want to be with you because of this. They might be thinking, well, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this right now. This is an active choice. So it's hard to kind of get away from that mindset. So I guess one of the thoughts that I had about that is, is doing some sort of practicing empathy when you're not in a situation that's essentially taking place. So what could that look like? Let's say we've got, we'll just put on a movie and pause it with somebody's face, in a certain expression of emotion, and have a conversation. What does it look like they're feeling right now? Okay. Well, why might they be feeling that way? And then hopefully that conversation goes for a little bit, and then we start to ask about we start to practice mindfulness. Well, what would you be feeling in that situation? Or if you were this person's friend, how might you be able to talk with them and help them in the situation? So I think the thing that I struggle with is that I tend to notice it in the situation. And then therefore I try to rescue, which unfortunately is usually trying to alienate. Not an intentional thing, but that honestly is what happens a lot of times. Like, if you do that, they're not going to want to be your friend. Like, oh, great, thanks. I'm just a failure. I appreciate that. What am I supposed to learn about being empathetic right now, Dad?
Yeah, it never seems to go well in the moment when the emotions are heightened, just like arguments with our spouses or partners, right? Like, it needs to take place in a time of calm. And I think you're right, JJ. Those visual cues in time where it's not like at the forefront of our kiddos, situation is really important. We were watching Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, and there was some stuff in there where Naomi was maybe like misidentifying facial cues or what was going on, and it was a great time to like pause the movie and talk about that and like, see where she was coming from and why she interpreted it that way. And we had some really good conversations about empathy, that seemed that we could like reference moving forward from that. Remember that Ruby Gillman scene where we thought there was this and it was this, so we, that's some lasting effects that I've seen, but rarely does it go good when, you're, like you said, she's in the moment of why doesn't anybody want to play with me? And you go, well, because you're bossy and mean. What, would you want to play with you either? And then it's like, oh, shame. Oh, I failed. I'm no good. And I think those visual cues are really important too, right? Because again, we try to like course correct or like trauma response immediately after trauma rather than like sitting down in a moment of calm with like visual cues and like, this is what this looks like. How do you interpret it? When is the time you felt like this? When is the time maybe you've made somebody feel like this? Which is, I think, where we can really connect the dots more.
Yeah, I mean, you said something really good. Ruby Gillman, right? Is the name of the program.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to point out that to you that you're probably well aware of is like you focus on a special interest that they have, and therefore their engagement is already rising because they already have a like or a comfort in that in that whatever content they're consuming. So being able to kind of translate what it is that this message is in the content for them to really analyze is something that's very powerful too. So when they're in the middle of play, they're probably focusing on what it is that they want in that situation. But when they are an observer to something that they actively choose to observe, that you've got some greater interest taking place. So you're providing a great opportunity for them to honestly, like really want to dive into what it is that this program is that they love. Like Wednesday Addams, you mentioned that opportunity to, see how some, learning of Taekwondo could be applied in her life based on what she sees in some program that she looks up to. And that got her interest piqued a little bit and wanting to, engage with it more. And that's very powerful for her because it's something that she's already chosen actively to invest herself into. And so therefore, you're basically just kind of continuing that, I guess I want to say that consumption of that media, and not just leaving it for you as the observer, but now the participant by having a conversation about it.
Yeah, man. Sometimes it can be hard though, to create that space and have those conversations. We've talked about how sometimes these neurodivergent meltdowns can last several hours, if not a day or several days. And we do one-on-one time with the kids each week. We rotate, and it was my week with Aubrey, our middle one, and so it was kind of choice day. She gets to dictate what we're doing, where we're doing in it, and Mama had some classes to teach online, so I kind of got the other two kids on our one-on-one day, but it was like still Aubrey gets to choose what we're doing, even though the other kids are here, like, because I have to watch all of you, like, it's still Aubrey's day, so she gets to choose. And we just kind of had a similar setup with that the week before with Naomi, where Mama had to teach a class, and it was Naomi's day, so Aubrey and Kaden had to do what Naomi wanted, and she got to dictate the day. And every time Aubrey complained, it's Naomi's day, Aubrey, you have to be respectful of that. Well, tables are turned, buddy, and Aubrey's making all the choices, and Naomi's in conflict with that and doesn't want to do that when she wants to do that. And as we're progressing along this day, it's becoming more and more resentful. We're packing more resentment into it. And Naomi's saying things like, well, I can't wait until it's my day. I'm not going to let Aubrey play, or I'm going to choose this because I know Aubrey hates it, or Aubrey picked that movie and she knows I hate that movie, so I'm going to pick this movie. And, she's just like planning how she's going to get back at her sister when she has the power, And
I'm laughing because it's not my situation.
Yeah, it's just pettiness, man, just petty, and every time Aubrey opens her mouth, Naomi is using it as an opportunity to dig at her. Well, I don't want to do that because you did this, and well, I don't want to eat that because you chose this, and just using every opportunity she can. Every opportunity that it's Naomi's turn to speak, she's making it about how she's going to get back at Aubrey, and I'm trying to it starts out patient and simple, JJ, with a perspective shift. Well, Naomi, last week was your week, and Aubrey had to do what you said, and she didn't complain, and she didn't make this about her. So we have to do the same, and then it becomes, more into Naomi. If you're going to be like this, you're going to have to go in the other room because this is Aubrey's day and you're ruining Aubrey's day for her, and then it turns into, we may not even have a day for you next week because of the way you're treating Aubrey now. If you're going to make it all about how you're going to punish Aubrey, maybe we just won't have a day, and then it's, well, you're losing your iPad for a week because you won't stop doing it. And then all the way until 2 a.m, when she comes out of her bed into our bedroom to wake us up to go, did you talk to Aubrey about that stuff yet? Because I'm really upset with her that she chose that movie. It's 2 a.m. and you're coming in here. It's keeping her up at night. She just can't let it go, JJ. Right. Her mind gets so locked into that ASD thought train, and there's only one path and the brakes are off and we're going full throttle until we get to this destination and we feel it's been accomplished, And that can be difficult, man, to how do you navigate in the moment, this is definitely a conversation we should go back and try to revisit to refocus and put that perspective shift in there, right? Maybe we can get her to identify with some of these concepts. But in the meantime, the one-on-one day with the other kid kind of got ruined, so sometimes we need to stop it in the moment, but how do we when it's come off the rails, so to speak, like that, and sometimes I think the answer to that is Exactly, brother. I'm still figuring it out, I guess.
Yeah, and it's such a cop-out answer that I'm going to say. It's not an answer, it's a discussion point to continue this conversation. But as we know, a beautiful child with ASD is very good at consistency.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm consistently not okay with this situation. I'm already thinking about my week and my choice and how I have full control. So my control is completely in that area where I know I have full control over, but I'm consistently unhappy in this area. So I'm truly just like on my wavelength, and nobody else is on this wavelength. But I don't care, as long as I can at least get my wavelength to be consistent in the way I want it. That's good for me. So how do you respond with that to that? I mean, again, like, God, I hate this term, brother, because it doesn't feel good in the moment when you're dealing with this stuff. But the long game is really part of it, right? Is if somebody is so good, your child is already so masterful at being consistent across the board that it almost comes across as obsessive. Let's be honest. It appears that obsession. If Naomi's coming into your room at 2 a.m. going, I think we still have some things to figure out on that one. Been thinking about that since 4 p.m. Yeah, let's have that conversation. Like that's an obsessive thought that they've got, or that she's had. What do you got to do? Somehow you got to understand their perspective, and that might be returning back to that same conversation multiple times. But the benefit, of course, being is that now we are trying to at least also show to them what we're hoping they'll show to us in the long run. And I doubt from week to week we're going to see enough of a pattern change for them to say, oh, yeah, okay, so you understand what I'm thinking. I understand what you're thinking here. Next week, it's going to be different. I'm going to just go along with everything. Well, no, because that's not consistent with how I want to, best have this situation go for myself, right? But the big thing is like, you try to do that. It's like, okay, this week is Aubrey's week. This week is Naomi's week. And this is our routine. How do you hammer that home with somebody who's obsessively thinking about what they want? You have to do that clear daily routine reminders, like this is going to be the case. This is going to be the case, to the point where like that's like the broken record in their heads, where they're thinking, okay, this is Aubrey's week. This is Aubrey's week. This is Aubrey's week. My week's coming up. My week's coming up. My week's coming up. And hopefully through that process, you help her give her a lot of empowerment to come up with a plan. So while Aubrey's week is taking place, and granted, buddy, I'm not saying you should try this for sure, but it is something that came off the top of my head. While it is Aubrey's week, you have check-ins with Naomi saying, hey, have you thought about what you want to do when it comes time for your week? What sounds good to you? So you're not taking away from Aubrey, but you are at least checking in and trying to understand where she's coming from, because it is hard to have to give up at any given moment. And, why should I give up my time? I know this isn't in my best interest or what I want to do. What's the benefit in me just pretending to be something I'm not with it? I think it's that routine that really has to be hammered home.
Yeah. Reflections on the whole experience were, I think when it comes to these moments, a lot of prep talks are really required with a child with ASD. With transitions, we got to give warnings, 15-minute warning, 10-minute warning, 5-minute warning. It can't just be, okay, now it's time to brush teeth. Like, you'll never get teeth brushed, brother. You gotta understand this strategy early on, or you'll never make it out alive. And if you miss those warnings, it's hard. So, that goes not just with transitions or chores, but, some like days like this where power is maybe taken away, or she's not having full autonomy over like the situation of what's going on. And, another thing is, this is why we do these days separate, so that this doesn't happen and that this doesn't get derailed. But, circumstances prevented it this time. But I think it's, to get to be more adamant about having one-on-one time as one-on-one time, because meltdowns are going to happen, and perspectives and interests are going to conflict, and how we ended up dealing with the situation, at least temporary, from bedtime to 2 a.m, where she had to bring it back up again, was, one of our strategies is it's got to be her idea. You can't say, go in the other room and don't watch the movie with us. You have to say, well, this isn't a movie that you're really interested in, right? Isn't there something that would be more interesting in the other room? Like drawing, you said you wanted to draw. So why don't you go do that in the other room then? Or do you think that would be fun? Or what would be more fun? And that's the strategy, which again isn't always easy. Sometimes just like as an impatient, tired parent, you just want to just be like, because I said so, and I think when we get to that point, we've really failed. We've really dropped the ball. And it just is the life of being a parent, that we just gonna have to repeat ourselves, brother. We just gonna have to have the same conversation over and over and over again until it sticks.
Yeah, I mean, it happens often where we just find ourselves going, are we really going through this again? Like yeah. Cohen on Halloween night had one obsessive thought, and he wouldn't get over it, and he'd ask the same question, and we would, his mom and I, we kind of just, at times we chuckled, and other times, later on down the road when it was asked again, we were kind of like, why are we still talking? Why can't we get past this point and enjoy the night? But that's because we were in our heads more than we were in his head. And it's so very easy for them to make us feel uncomfortable. Not make us feel, we get ourselves uncomfortable with the situation because we want to move on from an obsession that they're having, but that's not their world. So that consistency thing is a powerful thing for them to work through. And one of the other strategies that I had thought up while we were talking here too is, you mentioned like, removing them from the space. Man, it's so hard to always kind of try and change the way we talk about that and the way we act, the way we actually act on it. So let's say removing. Yeah. Let's say,
I know, and I know where you're going with this, JJ. And I wanted to say too earlier, like when I wanted to get her out of the space so I can concentrate on Aubrey because it's her day. There's a guilt part of me, a shame part of me, that I'm defaulting into that old our parents' generation mindset of go be in the other room and deal with it yourself. Like your feelings are too intense for me, so I can't help you with it right now. There's a little bit of that, but again, if we can reframe it, into not go in the other room, but isn't there something that you would rather be doing, or something that excites you more rather than like living in this sorrow, and tearing the whole house down with you? And not those words, but anyways, I just kind of derailed your thought, but I knew where you were going, and I wanted to kind of say the same thing earlier too, that I know that does spark a guilty aspect in us as parents, that we just want to like shove it off, right?
Yeah, and I think our intent is, what we really want to have happen for our kids is it's in good nature. It's not like, oh, I just want to dump you off somewhere because you're impossible. I think, we get frustrated, and sometimes we feel like we just want to, just make the situation stop. So it can feel that way, but I think that the things that I've learned over the years, especially, as Cohen's going to this new school, is that there are great opportunities. And I will say it depends also on your dynamic and what you have available to you in the situation. So one of the things that I thought about for, a married couple's home with multiple kids is, if the neurodiverse kid is having an emotional breakdown and is having a hard time with the agreed upon routine, or just the whatever's taking place that day, what about we have this special fidget item that they can have either in the moment, or if the moment's still too much for them, one of the two parents takes that kiddo aside and hands the fidget and say, here's our opportunity to connect. Let's talk about what's going on. How are you doing? Let's make this a special moment for you right now. And that special moment needs to be quiet, but here's your fidget. Here's your special thing that you can focus on and help you kind of work through this. Let's talk about it. I'm not saying that's the successful answer by any means, but then I'm a single dad, and sometimes I'm with my kiddo in a situation where I do have the opportunity to take him aside and kind of help comfort him. He is still one of those kids that absolutely feels comforted by a hug or just me like really kind of having a soft voice and a nod. That means a lot to him. It does practice empathy in return for him. So he's seeing some sort of validation of his feelings, which I think does, in some way, you know, in a little bit of a way, but still some way, model that behavior to him that we eventually would like to see him also model towards somebody else. And then at school for him, we're going through this IEP evaluation. And right now, what they do is if he is having a moment of full distraction, sometimes he comes in from recess, and let's say something happened on the playground and it wasn't resolved on the playground. So now, I'm supposed to go and sit down and do your math. I'm supposed to be sitting down and doing equations when all I have is this on my mind. Well, they oftentimes will recognize that, like, this is not the right moment for him to be able to sit and focus on that because he's still focusing in on that previous thing. They have a space for that. We have the special education room. And that doesn't mean we're dumping you off in the special education room. That means, hey, Cohen needs a little bit of a different space to make this a successful moment for him to learn. We have this set up over here for him to do just that. He's got these things to focus on. I don't know, kind of like that fidget thing I mentioned. I don't know. It's just a thought that I had in my head. So more or less, it's recognizing that our kids are having a moment of struggle with the moments that's presented to them. And I think we do, not because we're trying to, bow to their every need or their every desire, but instead we're trying to say, okay, we see you, we hear you. This sounds like this is a difficult moment for you. Guess what? This is the thing that we all understand and agree upon that we can do in these situations. So we're actually showing you a lot of care and love by taking you aside to the place that we know is your safe space when you're having big feelings. Because your big feelings are taller than the biggest peak over here in Salt Lake City or across the pond. It's just huge right now. And we want you to be able to come back down to where you're comfortable too. Because we don't want you to be feeling big feelings that are over top of the mountains. We want you to be here with everybody because we know you love everybody and everybody loves you.
Yeah, that's something that we've been working on too in our household. Of not that you can't have your feelings. You pointed me to a good book the other day too, Marriage Be Hard. And in there, one of the things that they said that I really enjoyed, it said, start explaining your anger and stop expressing it, and that was like something I needed to hear, in my own life, and my own struggles with my tone of voice or the way that I maybe present my opinion sometimes. And that was wildly impactful. And that's something that we've been trying to, verbalize to Naomi. It's okay to feel these feelings, but when you just react to them and you just let them out without any sort of acknowledgement or leash on them or some sort of boundary or restraint on them, it could make things worse, and it can make that things more detrimental. And we've tried all the fidget things, man, from serenity jars to the spinners to the squishy balls, and we've ended up with stains on our carpet and broken fidget ball bearings under the couch, and they only last a certain amount of time before neurodivergence seems to find a way to disassemble it and figure out how it works. But I think that each kid has a niche, a certain thing that resonates with them, that speaks to them, that can help them calm down. And as we're talking through this podcast, I'm realizing my daughter's is drawing. Or if you can set her aside to go do some art, that can really, like, whatever the thing was, that obsessive thought, drawing can be the tunnel vision right to it.
Same.
So I think that that's really going to be the superpower moving forward, is like, why don't we draw, and that's what worked last night during this whole meltdown, was like, instead of go separate yourself, go calm down, go stop thinking about this, stop ruining this moment. It was, go do something that you want to do right now. You like to draw? Go draw. And that was okay, now I can calm down to hear you enough to say, okay, she was still obsessed with it, but the emotions went from an 11 down to a 4. So I think that each one of our kids has something that grounds them, just, are we exploring it the right way? And are we asking what that is, and paying attention, paying attention to what that is. Hope I didn't just burp in your ear.
I feel safe. It's good. I love that because my kiddo also, he loves to draw. And we happen to have a book that we've had for years, and he still likes to return to it. Have you heard of The Color Monster?
No, what's this?
All right. Well, I'll get it when you're talking for a little bit, and then I can show it for a quick example on the screen here. But the color monster is essentially this monster will change his color based on the emotion he's feeling. And what's beautiful about it is it gives you examples throughout the book of how you might feel a certain feeling. And of course, the colors surrounding that, on that page are an example of that emotion. So they all have complementary drawings on each page, and it's kind of scribbled, but it's just a really, it's a really fun book, easy to digest. And then the beautiful part of it at the end is Color Monster seems to be feeling something new. It's a new color. What's this? And then not only is it trying to walk kids through how somebody might be feeling a certain emotion in a given situation, but then it also shows like the curiosity. It tries to bring out the curiosity in the reader by saying, oh, something new. What's going on with that emotion? Just like that beautiful movie Inside Out, right? As those colors are represented, not just the characters, but also their colors have something to do with how their emotions are responding to the situation. So I love that. And being able to, if we have kiddos with neurodiversity who find some sort of comfort in the idea of being creative and drawing, wow, let's go aside because we're having a big moment. Can you draw that moment? What does that feeling feel like if you were to put it down on paper? Let's see what you can express on paper, because wow, this is a great opportunity to try and understand where we're at right now. Anything that really kind of advocates for the individual and where they're suffering or where they're succeeding, and really kind of running with that, I think it's a perfect opportunity for them to try and explore that empathy, because then we can continue it further by saying, oh yeah, that happened in that situation. We said, Aubrey was kind of, you saw her lip was pushing out, her bottom lip was pushing out a little bit, and it looked like maybe she might have had tears. Like, what do you think she felt? Can you draw that too? Being able to not just keep it from within, but also eventually without, and continuing that conversation, I think is part of the process of finding that empathy within. Because I know ASD people are completely capable of developing deep empathy. It's just us that we sometimes don't know how to always get to that point with them, or we're just lost along the way ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna check that out. Color Monster. I got another good resource for you too. It's called Slumberkins. That's a good book series. I'm convinced it was made for kids with neurodiverse issues, because each book is about like a different thing, like how to garnish empathy, or how to deal with anger, or each book comes with a little plushy toy. So the one with empathy comes with like a narwhal little plushie, and it's about this narwhal that's trying to empathize with this dolphin that's, being rude or whatever. And so that was a really good series, if you have a kid with different neurodiverse issues, or, different, struggling in different areas, that was, really good. There was a hammerhead shark about, for dealing with anger, and there's a alpaca one for stress, or Bigfoot for self-esteem, dragons to help, garnish creativity, or the ibex for emotional awareness. So there's all sorts of different ones to help teach kids about different emotions. And it's using all of these techniques that we're talking about, visual cues, a plushie, something interactive, something that they can connect to, relate with, and then all these pictures in this book to, pause and talk about all of these different feelings and how they show up in different situations. So if you haven't checked that series out, I think you'd get a kick out of that too. Slumberkins.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not gotten into it, but I'm definitely curious about it, so I'll have to look into that. But you and I, we just came up.
The only downfall of Slumberkins is they are expensive.
Of course, you have to get a plushie with every single one.
Yeah, exactly. They're like $50 books because it's $10 for the book and $40 for the plushie.
And the artist fee, yeah. But I think you and I stumbled upon something great with this conversation that I'll highlight in a second. But yeah, the color monster here, you've got anger, joy, and sadness and all that stuff, which sounds an awful like Inside Out. I don't know which one came first, so maybe they need to duke that out eventually. I'm not sure, but yeah,
it was probably the color monster, man. Disney's always biting off of original content.
But it starts off, what I love, it starts off with the color monster's confused. So there's all sorts of emotions going on, which, truth be told, a lot of us sometimes are just in a state of wonder and confusion. And so we experience all the different emotions, and we could be pushed in any direction at any given time. But here, I'm just going to turn to, let's see. I think the scared one, the fear, was a really good example. But one thing I was going to highlight while I try and find this page is that I think you and I noticed something in this conversation. It's creativity. And sometimes I think we tell ourselves that our kids with ASD are not so creative. They're just trying to get through the situation as like logical and rational, or without real, empathy in mind. But creativity, every one of us has imagination. We just need to tap into understanding what it is that our kids with ASD have in terms of their imagination and really go with that. So if drawing is an outlet for them, they're going to find a way to create a story that makes sense to them so they can relate their emotions to it. And yeah, this is the one that happens to be, a one that hit my kiddo well. It says, when you're afraid, you feel tiny. You think you don't have the courage to face the gray shadows, and I can help you along your way. So all these little moments of creativity and imagination are shown visually, and also remind us of what that looks like inside of our heads when we're trying to make a story about this creative and colorful world that we have going on. So I think our imaginations with our ASD kids sometimes have to be, translated to us for us to understand them better. And if our kids, like yours and mine, it's through drawing, that's a great opportunity to really run with it. So what is it about the next ASD kid? If it's coding, well, what do you do with your coding? How could you make something special that makes you feel excited or joy or whatever, through that? We can find a way to get there. So that's that long game approach again. How do I best empathize with them so then they can in turn understand that type of language coming inward to then put it outward?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, man. Because, like you said, just because there's neurodiversity there, or we have kiddos with ASD, doesn't mean that empathy is off the table. Like this, I think it's a beautiful, different kind of empathy, but it's still a beautiful perspective on empathy. And I think with just the right guidance and curiosity, that we can really get them to understand it and use it to help them in life and help them be successful with not only the things that they're trying to obtain, but the relationships that I know that they do crave and that, my little one wants in her life. So I think, like you say, the persistence and the exploration of like the superpower of creativity and how we can use that to help us understand situations that maybe feel like they're far from understanding for our neurodivergent kids. I think that through persistence, we can really get them to kind of say, oh, wow, this isn't something that's out of my control, but if I use it this way, can really be powerful.
Yeah. And just think about what benefits everybody receives from something like that, really trying to understand others and being completely open and honest about yourself. I mean, what's a classic example of somebody saying, "Oh, I don't care where we go to eat," and then later on you find out, oh, they really didn't want to go to the place that everybody said that they're agreed upon, and you find out later and they're disappointed. Well, do we need to be upset about that? It sounds like they needed to vocalize more. So when we have kiddos like our ASD kids who simply state what's going on and why they're struggling, like we should always give them that same, that same benefit of being fully transparent, instead of hiding something from them. Because then, what does that teach them? It teaches them that it's better to hide, or it doesn't teach them anything because we're not actually spelling it out for them. Sometimes they really need, we could be upset and they could be on a completely different thought, but when we're able to explain our feelings to them, like we talked about earlier with Marriage Be Hard, mentioning it, when we can explain our feelings to them, then they have the opportunity to really try and understand where it is we're coming from. They might still be caught up in their thought, but if we continue the path of saying, I'm explaining to you where I'm coming from, like that's the greatest gift we can give for them, in hopes of learning how we empathize and how we process our emotions.
Yeah, really good stuff, bud. Appreciate the conversation here. And not to worry, listeners, I will put all of these good books and resources in the show notes for you. Never Split the Difference, and Marriage Be Hard, The Color Monster, and links to some Slumberkin books if you're a millionaire. That's my one PSA to Slumberkins. Like, lower the price on that, guys. Come on, this is kids products we're talking about.
They're not in Dolly Parton's book club, are they?
Yeah. But thanks for the talk, JJ. I think there was some really good stuff here, and definitely stuff that I'm going to implement moving forward after we hit stop on this podcast. So thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. I hope to follow some of my own advice on this one time too.
Oh, isn't that always the most difficult part, is following our own advice? Wait, before we go, I have to look up this one lyric, but go ahead and talk while I look it up real quick to end this podcast with.
Well, I just want to, point it out to the listeners, I get a lot of inspiration from this guy here that I get to chat with every week. And there's so much wisdom that I gain from you, buddy. And the fact that you talk through these things and how the situation had some failures and stuff, and then how it had some successes, like this is how that growth really exists in the process. And so I love the idea of us talking about our failures and reminding ourselves that we're gonna walk out the door and we're gonna trip over the same damn rock that we just talked about moving out of the way. And we're still gonna learn, we're still gonna grow through it if we don't fall on our face every single time and have to be rushed to the hospital. But yeah, we are definitely growing from this, and I hope that everybody gets some good stuff out of this, because I certainly do.
Yes, I hope so too. And to end on a good bit about advice, be careful whose advice you buy, but be patient with those who supply it. Advice is a form of nostalgia. Dispensing it is a way of fishing out the past from the disposal, wiping it off, painting over the ugly parts, and recycling it for more than it's worth. I don't know how valuable that is as a coach saying that, but something I always listen to. That's from Baz Luhrmann's "Everybody Wears Sunscreen." Yeah. If you've heard that song, which I always kind of have to seem to listen to like once a year to kind of put things into perspective. So I'll put that in the show notes too, guys. So not to worry. But thanks, guys, for listening. Thank you, JJ. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this has been another episode of the ADH Dads. See you next time.